The Importance of Luke Skywalker by So Uncivilized. Once again, legendary name.
I hear so many young people today talk about a world that's emptied of heroism, where there are no more noble things to do. What do you say to them?
Have you checked the U.S. military? Have you checked military history? That's all I'm going to say. The military has to deal with so many things on a daily basis, and I think that it's incredibly underrated what they have to deal with. It's underspoken. They do deal with a lot. People do need heroes, citing Halo. And people need heroes, Chief.
The story of Star Wars means something to people, and that's even true in Star Wars.
Darth Vader.
But as for what that story means, well, there's probably as many answers to that as there are people watching this video. So it might be easier to focus on what Star Wars means to its storyteller. After all, the reason C-3PO is telling the Star Wars story is because he's trying to explain who he is. Which, in a sense, is what George Lucas was doing too. But the most personal parts of this series probably aren't wrapped up in C-3PO.
It's kind of wild seeing Mark Hamill, because even to this day, I mean, so Mark Hamill has definitely gotten political, is what I'm going to say. What I can... Ignoring that, Mark Hamill is a very outspoken individual. If something, just from the things I've seen, right? If something is just in sheer stark contrast to certain logical things, right? Or certain moral things. I mean, Mark Hamill doesn't have an issue, apparently, just like tweeting about it. And I have so much respect for Mark Hamill because he is truly one of those people that he did something super legit. He, to a lot of people, is Luke Skywalker. And as far as I'm aware, he's had other acting stints, right? He infamously being a Joker VA, right? Mark Hamill truly is just next level. And I'm just going to take the second, not that he'll ever see this, and not that I'll ever be big enough that I'll be in the same room with him, other than at a convention he is already slated to be at. Mark Hamill, thank you for being just an icon for so many people and so many generations. For people like me whose parents grew up seeing Star Wars, not A New Hope, Star Wars, when it came out, and, you know, through to modern day where people are still looking back at the series and, you know, looking at Luke in terms of character analysis and philosophy and, you know, how they can just be better as people, to be an icon. Thank you, Mark Hamill, you absolute legend. Have nothing but respect for you. Yes, he was also Ericus from Kingdom Hearts as well.
Yes, R2, I was just coming to that.
They probably have more to do with the character Lucas, named after himself.
Got him.
Not that you would know from the way people talk about him. Luke is often treated like he's just a generic hero archetype. People will even refer to other characters as the Luke Skywalker character, and what they mean is the sincere, if somewhat boring character the larger story revolves around. Now, this is obviously a little insulting if you care about the Frodos and Katnisses of the world.
I care.
But in fairness to the people who say things like this, Luke thinks of himself as a generic hero too. It's just that what George Lucas has in store for his namesake proves to be much more unique and interesting than that. Luke starts off A New Hope stuck at the dead end of life on a basically empty planet.
Where are you going?
Looks like I'm going nowhere.
When he meets
It was really cool seeing Uncle Owen and Aunt Beirut in Kenobi. It was very cool to see.
Obi-Wan and receives his father's lightsaber. It turns his vague dreams of leaving something.
Yes, you are correct. He was also Fire Lord Ozai from Avatar, and that absolutely blew my mind when I found that out. It was perfect, and now I can't unhear it. Mark Hamill has truly been an icon.
Someday into something much more concrete.
I want to come with you to Alderaan.
Essentially, Luke now has a destiny.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Yeah.
And at this point, it does seem like
Hold up. I want to become a Jedi like my father, Obi-Wan. Oh, he doesn't know. There's so much flashing in his mind right now. There is so much.
It does seem like Lucas is telling a generic hero type of story. The rest of the movie could be almost any fantasy adventure, with Luke taken from humble beginnings by a wizard who gives him a magic sword to save a princess from a dark tower guarded by an evil sorcerer. Pretty standard stuff.
I mean, it's an opera. What are you wanting from it? I know people will criticize. He'll have criticized Star Wars for being too bland or too over the top. You know, it's like it's literally a space opera. Like that's what the media is designed to be. It's designed to be over the top. It's divined. It's supposed to have these defined character tropes, right? Like literal, actual space opera. Literal. Vinny Vinesauce fans, you'll get it.
As the story wraps up, it's hard to see what would separate Luke Skywalker from any of a dozen other heroes. Until the next movie starts. In Empire, every single trait that led Luke to becoming a hero suddenly works against his destiny of becoming a Jedi. You know, sometimes Lucas doesn't get credit for how clearly defined his characters are. In this case, Luke is loyal to a fault.
I'm not going to Alderaan. I've got to get home. It's late. I'm in port as it is.
Fearless when it's time for action.
The droids belong to her. She's the one in the message. We gotta help her.
And a little impatient with the people who doubt him.
I would say reckless too, but that's very much of his father as well.
Gonna fly it, kid. You?
You bet I.
Oh boy, Tannison Ford. Kip, don't you mean Harrison Ford? You guys in the comments, the few of you that know what I'm talking about when I say Tannison Ford, let me know. Sound off in the comments, you absolute legends.
I'm not such a bad pilot myself. We don't have to sit here and listen.
Only this time, instead of flying him to victory, these traits cause him to crash and burn. Which actually happens twice, just in case you miss it the first time.
Yeah, he does crash twice.
We're starting to see that Lucas's vision of heroism is a lot more complex than it appears. When Luke's frustration boils over at the universe blocking his path to becoming a Jedi, he's told point blank, it's not the universe that has the wrong idea.
Adventure. Excitement. A Jedi craves not these things. You are reckless.
His training.
Yeah, I want you to understand, as of watching this, I have been in desperate need for a Star Wars triple trilogy rewatch, and I completely forgot that Yoda called him reckless, so I'm going to take that W for Kip knowing the source material. I'll take that W. Yeah. The Seagulls meme intensifies. You are correct.
Training is repeatedly sabotaged by his refusal to understand what he's seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
No matter how strong of a warning he gets. Everything that happens on Dagobah suggests that who Luke is and who he wants to be aren't the same person at all.
You want the impossible.
It's not even surprising when Vader is able to use his fearlessness and loyalty to lure him into a trap.
Yes.
I can't keep the vision out of my head. They're my friends. I gotta help them.
You must not go.
He does lack that life experience. At this point in time, Luke doesn't have the experience. You have to remember, Vader is the Jedi killer. I know it's Legends, but there's that comic where Vader, we have you surrounded. All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men. Vader is the Imperial attack dog. Vader is the Jedi killer. So you think Luke in episode 5 stands any chance against Vader? I used to do the combat critiques. I can't because copyright. You know, I went over the entire fight. Vader controlled the entire fight in episode 5. Luke had no chance of winning. It's so good.
Han and Leia will die if I don't.
He can't see himself as anything other than the hero coming in to rescue his friends. What's important to hammer home here is that at no point in this self-destructive spiral is Luke ever acting out of character.
No, it is not, Raven. Episode 5 was not an even fight in any capacity. I can tell you, in the Luke v. Vader fight in Empire Strikes Back, Vader controlled every aspect of that fight. Yes, Luke was able to leave the carbonite chamber. He threw the hose in Vader's face, which, if anything, Vader got excited by. He's like, ooh. He had flashbacks to Anakin in his youth, right? He had control of that entire fight. And I can't do it because copyright. Maybe if it shows a clip from the fight, I can tell you, like specifically what parts of it. Vader is close. He's controlled. He has that economy of movement. He moves in a faster tempo than Luke does. Luke has these wide swings. He's doing these wild motions, and he's these grandiose moves, and is wearing himself down while Vader is just effectively sitting there. It is not an even fight by any means. Vader controlled that entire fight, in which, if anything, makes the Luke, why did you do this? And understanding afterwards, okay, I just got dunked on. I got styled on and finessed, leading to Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, where Luke and him are on even terms realistically, he got a lot of training.
This is who he is.
Luke, don't hit the trap! It's a trap!
It's just that being a hero is one thing, and being a Jedi is something very different.
Yes.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
Oh boy, we might actually get to see this fight. Oh boy. Copyright, please.
But whatever.
Oh, wait, chat. He has the high ground. Oh, he can learn. He has the high ground.
But whatever the dangers on Luke's path to becoming a Jedi, they're nothing compared to the dangers on the path of becoming like his father.
I am your father.
I love that this reveal was kept from literally the entire cast. I think Mark Hamill knew of this reveal the day of recording. Beautiful.
This reveal isn't famous just because Luke's dad is the bad guy. It's famous because this is the moment Luke suddenly realizes that he's promised to turn into this man.
From a certain point of view, he wanted to be a Jedi like his father. Yes. Now, was he going to become the Sith that Vader became? Or I guess, would he become Vader like Anakin became Vader? Or would he become the Jedi that Anakin was always meant to be? From a certain point of view, this is correct.
He finally sees the other path he might be going down.
Luke, it is your destiny.
Yes, correct, Voracious. You are correct. Vader was not a Jedi. Anakin becoming Vader was him becoming a Sith, ceasing to be a Jedi, and from a certain point of view, Vader killing Anakin. That's why I backtracked what I did.
Turns out Luke's destiny has a real, well, dark side to it.
Why didn't you tell me?
How
Lucas is
why didn't? And that's the thing, is that he couldn't have told you. How would Luke have taken that? Luke is absolutely right to be stressed in this situation. He's right to be distressed, frustrated even. Obi-Wan couldn't have told him. There wasn't a way that this would have gone well.
Telling a different sort of story from most of his contemporaries. Not every hero deals with questions of destiny or fate, but when they do, it usually means the hero has a feeling that they really ought to be someone more remarkable or more important or just cooler than they already are. And meeting that destiny either means becoming an awesome version of themselves, or just becoming themselves. Here's a specific example. The new version of Captain Kirk starts off as a very similar character to Luke Skywalker.
I'm seeing chat say that I was incorrect on the until the day of recording. Allegedly, it was done in a different take, and that they told Mark Hamill that Vader would tell him that he killed his father, so the reaction was genuine. If that is the case, Lucas is next level. Don't get me wrong, Lucas has some wooden dialogue. The infamous "I don't like sand," even though I love it. There's definitely people that have said this is pretty wooden. Or the pear scene from Attack of the Clones, the famous pear scene where a lot of people take issue with it. That being said, generally, I really don't have an issue with Lucas. I think he's got some great ideas.
He's a hot rodder who grows up around a farm and never knew his father, but feels the pressure to become a great pilot like him anyway, and can't escape this nagging feeling that he belongs among the Okay, geez,
Among Us?
This is like the exact same.
Among
Anyway,
Us.
the big difference between them is that his flaw is running away from his destiny.
Why are you talking to me, man?
His mentor figures basically spend the whole movie begging him to follow that feeling that he was destined for something great. And once he decides to go for it, things fall into place really quickly. It's a movie that looks quite a bit like Star Wars, but it's basically doing the opposite of everything that Star Wars is about. You know, if anybody asks. Star Wars belongs to an older tradition, one in which the words destiny and fate meant the same thing as the word doom.
Yeah.
In those older stories, meeting your destiny might be inevitable, but it wasn't likely to be a pleasant experience. This isn't to say that those other movies are bad, it's just to point out that the older tradition understood heroism, but it also felt that ambition would often have unforeseen consequences.
Which is true. No, absolutely. And I see in chat that he needs a great editor to push him. Yes, no, I think that Lucas has some great ideas and is great at writing. And I think a good editor with Lucas could lead to amazing things. Absolutely.
Because I think the core issues that I'm dealing with are, if they were valid 2,000 years ago, they've got to still be valid today, even though they're not in fashion. And I think we've gone for a few generations where a lot of the sort of more basic stories have fallen by the wayside.
I would argue so. And so here's the thing. You have to remember that, like, if we don't have certain stories, if we don't have certain medium, people tend to forget things. You have to remember, in a military history perspective, when World War I rolled around in Europe, right? How many people were called to the front? How many people volunteered to go fight in World War I, right? Not necessarily for any political agenda, but because they'd heard stories of King Arthur. They'd heard about the glory of the French Revolution, right? And how much of an utter just disaster that World War I turned out to be, how inhuman it was. And now you'll have people that enlisted since World War I. They remember World War I. They remember stories of World War II. And it influences decisions to go into military service, and rightfully so. So I do think that Lucas is onto something there where, we've had writers like Tolkien, right? And, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings was around before Star Wars was made, obviously. And creating great stories like this to showcase a certain point or points and even be a cautionary tale or even a fable, right? I would argue is incredibly important. It was going to be a great adventure instead it was a nightmare. Absolutely. You are correct. So yeah, having stories like this to help push future generations on, where remember how the prequels were received, how they were so poorly received for so many years, but now they're widely beloved. You have people screaming Hayden Christensen's name and just the absolute and the best of praises, right? A story might not necessarily be for the people that first watch it. It could absolutely be for the people that come after, the people that are educated in different ways, the people that come from a different era, effectively. I would argue that the time frame that I remember a lot of, pre-2008, is incredibly different, if not an entire different era than what we currently live in. So there's a lot to unpack with that statement, and Lucas did put out a great piece of media with Star Wars.
Luke's doom is still undecided at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, which is why, on the one hand, he's looking and acting uncomfortably like Darth Vader. While at the same time, he's back to the role of hero and even seems to have picked up some Jedi-like traits. He's willing to be patient and plan things, leaving Jabba to make all the impulsive mistakes. It's almost like Luke has gotten stronger in both of the conflicting halves of his destiny. His meetings with Yoda and Obi-Wan confirm this, that he hasn't chosen a path until he's willing to face his doom head on.
You must confront Vader. Only then a Jedi will you be.
From my understanding from Luke's wardrobe throughout the entirety of Return of the Jedi, him wearing his black attire is him struggling with the dark side throughout the entire story, where you get to the end and it pops open, to reveal the white underneath. That is him, not embracing the dark side. That is him being good underneath all along. It was a parallel that I had understood as happening.
The heart of the conflict Lucas is building here is that either Luke has to kill his father or give up on his dream of becoming a Jedi. But Luke identifies too much with the man he now sees as Anakin Skywalker.
I can't kill my own father.
He understands the connection between them, even if Vader himself denies it.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
By the way, all of this is happening in what is ostensibly a children's adventure movie.
Yes.
The increasingly internal nature of the conflict in the Star Wars saga is another thing that separates it from most of its other peers. It's also why it's fine that the battle above the second Death Star is so reminiscent of the battle above the first. It reminds us that the conflict facing Luke is no longer out there, but in here.
Oh, yes, it's such a good theme. Like, all of this is set up beautifully for an opera.
The confrontation with the Emperor is where Lucas will resolve the question of whether Luke will be able to vanquish the supreme avatar of the dark side, while the alternative is literally staring him in the face. And of course, when George Lucas has a question like that, there's only one way it's going to be answered.
It's important to note here, look at their sabers. Luke is not striking at the Emperor. He is striking away from the Emperor, and Vader is meeting him in the middle.
The question of destiny hangs over every duel in the
We've gone over both of these fights in the old combat critiques. I'd have to find a way to make them work in terms of copyright because they are a nightmare to try to wade through when I'm trying to react to the fight.
Star Wars saga. So, Return of the Jedi features the last Duel of the Fates. This final duel is about whether Luke can escape his father's destiny. And though Luke is always looking for the high ground, he can't ever stay above Vader for long.
I mean, to be fair, when you have Obi-Wan sass you on the high ground, how many times? I mean, he's going to get pissed off eventually.
Because ultimately, he isn't. Whatever one of them is capable of, the other is as well. This is why it's misguided to think that the Star Wars movie's vision of good and evil is just black and white. Lucas isn't telling stories about good people and evil people. He's telling stories about characters who can choose good or evil.
Yes.
The light side and the dark side are the two.
Anakin didn't have to become Vader. In the office with Windu, where Windu was using the pod to its fullest extent and cornered Sidious, that was the one of the only cruxes in Sidious's plan that it could have failed. The Empire could just have not failed. It could just not have happened. Sidious could have gone down at that point in time. It was Anakin choosing his fear, choosing to give into his fear, choosing to side with Palpatine and, cutting off Mace Windu's hand, and then, Mace Windu went out the window, and thus he was now locked into that fate. Anakin could have chose to side with Windu, to understand at that point in time. In any other circumstance, Windu would have been wrong to strike him down because it was Sidious, because it was Palpatine, because he had the senators in his pocket. He had the Galactic Senate in his pocket. It was the only way to definitively end it and end the Clone Wars. Anakin made that choice to become Vader, as Luke made the choice to not become another Vader.
Two paths these choices take them down. As long as Luke can't make this choice, he's left at the mercy of his emotions, which can take him to a pretty dark place.
We've definitely gone over this in a old combat critique. Luke really pushed Vader here, and Vader really didn't know how to respond. And he is.
Dark place.
So he's making wide swings, right? It's sneak attack, surprise, right? High guard takes Vader by surprise. I would argue very un-Jedi-like, but I mean that's me personally. Thrusts forward,
as long
catches his blade, pushes it to the right. Well, yeah, to the right, our left.
As Luke can't make this choice, he's left at the mercy of his emotions.
He is making very, very wide straight. He is open. If Vader is able to just rapier thrust down the middle, Luke is incredibly open right now. He is fueled by his emotions, making these subpar plays, as I'm going to call them. He is choosing to make these broad, overarching swipes, these broad strokes, and it's causing him to be open. But he is advancing on Vader. Vader is having to maintain this close guard. He's having to maintain this close stance. But as unpredictable as Luke is right now, and how aggressive he's pushing forward, Vader is being pushed back. Look at Luke's staggered stance, how off balance he'd be if Vader pushed back. But he is pushing Vader back at this point in time.
Luke works intuitively through most of the movie until he gets to the very end. He goes back and forth with his emotions about fighting his father, not fighting his father.
Luke's hatred of the idea of following his father's destiny leads him to try to destroy that destiny completely. Which is exactly the idea.
Good, Anakin, good. Fulfill your destiny and take your father's place at my side.
In Star Wars, destiny is a trap. Destroying Vader and becoming Vader are the same thing.
Yeah. Instead, he chooses mercy.
Never.
This he should not have done, though. when confronted with the most powerful Sith in this era, do not throw away your lightsaber. I understand the gesture here, Luke. I understand the gesture here. Maybe don't throw away your lightsaber for that. I understand it. Don't get me wrong. I totally get why you threw it away. Probably not the best idea.
If Luke wants to decide his own destiny, it means he has to embrace the good still left in his father.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
It's not the first time Palpatine has been disappointed by someone who would be a replacement for Vader. It's really not. He'll just go back to Vader. Yes, Vader, I knew you would overcome this Luke Skywalker who could not become greater than you. Yeah. My Dick Wizard Palpatine voice is just next level.
And then, finally, someone is willing to call him a Jedi Knight.
So be it.
Uh-huh.
Jedi.
He's upset.
Doesn't it take a leap of faith?
Yes. You'll notice Luke uses that quite a bit.
That's why, yep.
Luke doesn't find victory the way other heroes do either. At the end of each Star Wars movie, Luke has to surrender and allow someone else to save him. This time, there's only one person that could be.
Is this going to be the original or the remastered clip? Because I'm used to the original clip where Vader says nothing. In the remastered clip, he says no.
The path Luke finds to his destiny is important because if he can become a Jedi like his father
can become a Jedi.
Can become a Jedi like him.
Okay, this is the original then, because he says no, and then starts throwing over the edge. Okay, this is the original. And I think I'm going to take a second here to where people do take issue with Palpatine surviving this. You have to remember in Legends, so while people take issue with Exegol and the Snoke clones, right? In Legends, Palpatine did a lot of weirder Force essence transfer stuff that this is just par for the course for him. I understand people's aversion and like, well, how could Palpatine survive? He did it in Legends, don't worry. He did clone things in Legends too. There were some really sussy things that happened in Legends with Palpatine.
The ultimate irony of Luke being talked about as a generic hero is that at the end of the day, he's not the hero of the story at all.
Which makes me, from the writing philosophy of Lucas, and this is getting ahead, like way into Legends content, because we never got a true Abeloth finale. I think the last we heard of it, right, was Abeloth was on Coruscant, and they took Abeloth into a conflict. I think was it a force? I can't remember what it was. Abeloth was thrust into this lake or whatever, but Abeloth, the threat of her, still remained. And I think after that, that's when the rights got sold over to Disney. So we've never seen a conclusion to Abeloth. Using this same writing philosophy, I'm very curious where Lucas would have gone with the Abeloth storyline, which I argue we'll never get.
And so ends the story of Star Wars. Well, okay, obviously not exactly. But now the stories are told by someone other than George Lucas. What that ultimately means for Star Wars is probably best left for another time. But at the very least,
I get people in chat asking who's Abeloth. That is a conversation that I do not have an hour to get into because I will tangent for an hour. I highly recommend looking at Star Wars content creators for a more professionally summarized account of who Abeloth was.
Changes what Star Wars means. It kind of has to change it, since what Star Wars always meant for Lucas was a way to tell all of us who he is.
Yeah.
I've discovered along the way that happiness, you live in two worlds here. Happiness is pleasure, and happiness is joy. Pleasure is short-lived. It lasts an hour, lasts a minute, lasts a month, and it peaks and then goes down. It peaks very high. But the next time you want to get that same peak, you have to do it twice as much. It's like drugs. On the other hand is joy. Joy is a thing that doesn't go as high as pleasure, but it stays with you. Joy is something you can recall. The secret is that even though it's not as intense as the pleasure, the joy will last you a lot longer. People who get the pleasure, they keep saying, well, if I can just get richer and get more cars, you'll never relive the moment you got your first car.
No.
That's it. That's the highest peak. If you're trying to sustain that level of peak pleasure, you're doomed.
Yes.
Just accept
You
the
are chasing the dragon at that point.
fact that it's here and it's gone. And maybe again it'll come back.
Yeah.
Pleasure is purely self-centered. It's all about your pleasure. It's a selfish, self-centered emotion that's created by a self-centered motive of greed. Joy is compassion. Joy is giving yourself to somebody else or something else. And it's a kind of thing that is, in its subtlety and lowness, much more powerful than pleasure.
Yeah.
You get
I
hung up
agree.
on pleasure, you're doomed. If you pursue joy, you will find everlasting happiness. So with that, I'm gone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
I agree with a lot of what he says.
That's it for the Lucas saga, for now at least. Subscribe or click around below if you want to be first in line when this channel tackles the sequel trilogy. And the comments might be a good place to talk about what Star Wars means to you.
Oh, yeah.
Until that project comes around.
I've traveled too far and seen too much to ignore the despair in the galaxy.
No, and I don't dislike the sequel trilogy. I think it does have its issues, but at the end of the day, I mean, I'll still watch them. Now, Lucas is one of those that I've heard both sides of the fence. I've heard that Lucas is an amazing individual, a great writer. I've heard he's a wooden writer. I've heard that Lucas is allegedly a racist. Specifically, the reasoning they use were because all these aliens are always doing these different things, like the Tatooine music players, right? They're always doing it. I've heard weird takes from both sides, let's be real. And I don't think I've ever actually delved into his interviews as much as I should have. As someone who used to write, as someone that would love to write again, I would absolutely love to pick writing back up. Just time, right? Time and, making sure I'm doing it right. I think these are going to be places that I'll have to go to these, maybe not react to them, obviously, because of the nature of it, but I'd love to go back through the Lucas and even Tolkien interviews and stuff and see kind of their perspective and where they came from. Star Wars is definitely one of those stories that it is over the top. It's cliche, but it's by design. It's made to be cliche. It's made to be over the top. It's made to even be divisive at certain things. It's made to tell stories that not only children can enjoy, but also adults can enjoy. They can find new things with it time and time again. What are your thoughts, though? What are your thoughts on Luke Skywalker as a character? What are your thoughts on Mark Hamill? What are your thoughts on Lucas as a writer and some of the philosophies he brings to the table? What's your favorite movie and your favorite fight? Do you want Kip to do combat critiques, getting a little taste of what we talked about in a prior combat critique in this one, going over stance, guard, etc.? Would you like to see that? And let me know in the comments section. Please keep it civil, and I will see you in the next one.